Today is September 15th, 2014. My name is Victoria Neidig. We are interviewing Henry Leids, an Army veteran here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. It is part of the library's Veterans Testimonial Project in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Henry, for being here today and participating in our project. Thank you. Where and when were you born?
I was born in the Bronx 92 years ago. And what else do you want to know?
Mm-hmm. No, that's fine. Who were your parents, and do you know their occupations?
My father worked in the post office, born in this country. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and just raised us.
Did you have any siblings? And if so,
Yes,
what were their names?
I had a sister. Her name was Lenore. She died of cancer. I had a brother who was also in the service, and he passed on. I'm not sure from what.
Do you know what branch of the service he was in?
He was in the infantry. He was caught in that Battle of the Bulge. And he had a very interesting thing happen. He was laying on his stomach, playing dead, while the Germans overtook him, and they were just shooting randomly, and they missed him.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Before I entered the service, I can't recall what.
All right, so what branch of the service did you serve in?
I was in the Army Signal Corps.
Were you enlisted or did you draft?
No, I enlisted.
Okay.
I enlisted and, well, that's it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why did you choose that specific branch of the Army?
Well, because before I went into the service, I was up on electronics, and it just seemed to be the best place to be. I was doing a lot of, building a lot of electronic stuff at that time.
Were any of the other branches, did you seem interested in joining any of them, or is the Army?
No, I was interested in the Signal Corps because I thought I'd make a decent contribution easily.
Mm-hmm. What happened when you departed from training camp and during the early days of training?
Well, I was shipped out to Camp Crowder, Missouri, and I was trained as a pole lineman. I used to climb poles, and I took to it pretty much. The interesting thing is when there were a number of people that would not climb, and the Army sergeants would give them a real rough time. I climbed, sat on the crossbar, and as long as I was up there, they left me alone. And I got my training there and then shipped to the Signal Corps in, where is that place? I'll think of it in a little bit. It was in New Jersey, I can't remember the name of it, but it was in New Jersey. And there they shipped me to an area where they trained me to handle radio, which was what I really wanted anyway. So I became not a radio operator, but I joined a company that set up this apparatus so that people can communicate with one another. Actually, I was in the middle in a six-man team, and there was a group at the terminal and a group at the other terminal, and I was in the middle sending the messages through. It was kind of like a booster. And that's what I did, but I had some interesting things happen while I was doing that. Maybe we'll get to that a little later.
Okay. Was that boot camp that you were at prior to going over to New Jersey, or was boot camp in New Jersey?
The boot camp was actually in Camp Crowder. And in New Jersey, they just trained me for something specific.
What happened when you departed from training camp and during your early days of training?
Okay, now.
Maybe you can elaborate on what you were just going to say.
Yeah, well, I was in the 3186 Signal Service Battalion, and what I did there was I joined the group, and we did some more training in Bear Mountain, New York. And after we finished that training, then they shipped us over. And I wound up eventually in England. However, on the way over, we were attacked by submarine. We were all standing on the deck of the ship, and fortunately we were not hit, but we could see that others were hit, and you could see the flames and smoke.
Going back really quick to basic training, do you recall any of your instructors?
No, not at all. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a minute! I do remember one. He was formerly in the German army or the Austrian army. I'm not sure. His name was Sergeant Leids. Why I remembered that, I'll never know. But he was a real tough guy. An interesting incident with him is we would be all lined up in a long, thin line, and he would just yell, and he'd say, "All right, you guys," and he spoke with an accent. He says, "I want all you guys to listen to me carefully." He says, "I want all those who had a college education to move to the left." And he says, "All those with a high school, get alongside of them." And he says, all the rest of you dumb son of a bitches," he says, "watch the other guys picking up garbage." And that's what he did.
How did you adapt to military life?
I got along pretty well. I enjoyed, I can't say the Army owes me anything.
How did you do in regards to physical, the regimen, the barracks, the food, the social life? How about all that?
Well, I got along well. I melted in with the rest of the people, and the food, people complained about the food. I enjoyed it, so I was pretty happy in the service.
Where did you serve?
I served in England, France, Germany, and then when we left Germany, they put us on a boat, on a ship, and the next thing we thought we were going home because the war had ended in Europe. We were sure we were going home. But the next thing we saw were palm trees. And we said, well, what's going to happen? We're going to go through the Panama Canal and come up the coast, the west coast. So sure enough, we went through the Panama Canal, but we didn't go up the west coast. We kept going west, west, west. And the next thing we were in a little place called the Ulysses Islands. And that's when they dropped the bomb. And from there, eventually we landed in Manila, where in the Philippines, where they were still fighting even though the bomb was dropped. So that was it. And from there, after Manila, we shipped to Japan. And on the way to Japan, we hit a hurricane or a very bad time. One of the ships, one of the LSTs, sunk. We were rocking terribly. We thought we were going to go over, but we didn't. We finally landed in Japan.
Do you have any other memories, good or bad, while you were abroad?
Well, no, I really don't. I think I did pretty good. I was in that middle group handling the equipment. We had some incidents there. One day, while we were up in the top of the mountain. Oh, incidentally, there's something else I just remembered. We had to get to a mountaintop, and we were in the Siegfried line, and before we could get up there, it had to be cleaned out. It was a German stronghold. So the 36th Division sent an infantry battalion up there. They wiped out all the Germans, not all, but most of the Germans, and then we set up.
Where was this?
It was a little town called, the town below the mountain was a town called Bergzabern. And then we were able to set up our equipment. And it's interesting that when we had the time, we were burying bodies and body parts that some were German, there were some Americans. And with the Americans, we just put a cross and hung their what do you call those things?
Dog tags? Dog tags?
Yeah, the dog tags, correct, thank you. We hung them until they were able to be removed. But one other incident, while I think about it, our company was running, not the company, our six-man team was running this motor, a PE-75. I'm amazed that I can remember some of these things. It had to be changed every 4 hours. And one day, there were 3 or 4 men that came up there. They were freedom fighters for the Free French. And they didn't know what was going on up there, so they came up very carefully. And it took some time before we were able to establish that we were community friends.
You were talking about the equipment on the front line. Were you on the front line with the equipment?
Yeah. That was the Siegfried line. There were 2 lines. There was the Maginot line and the Siegfried line. And they were pretty much side by side. And we had to get up into the German area so we could establish communications.
Can you elaborate on any other combat action that you witnessed?
Other combat action. Well, I can tell you another little story. We had a 2.5-ton truck with a machine gun mounted on it, and we were looking for some food. And we got into the truck, and as we were going down the road of just a little way, somebody opened fire on us. And I thought I was fast, but as fast as I was to get away from there, my sergeant was sitting in the gully by the time I got there. And we stayed that way for a good half an hour. And I know I was in a trench, and the bullets were coming down, but maybe 3 or 4 feet away from me. So I moved to another area of the trench where they couldn't do anything. We stayed that way for a good half an hour or more, and then we left the truck and we traveled back up on foot, and we got back to the campsite. We told the guys what was happening. They laughed at us. You don't know what you're talking about. So we took another truck down with 2 other fellows, because we were a 6-man team. We left 2 up there. And when we got to the truck, I jumped in, went over to the machine gun, and I kept that gun going in the area that I thought the firing was coming from. And I knocked down trees. I can remember trees falling over just from the bullets that were flying. And then we took both trucks back, and for the most part it was uneventful.
How did you feel when you were witnessing casualties and destruction on the front line?
Well, I didn't see many in the way of casualties. Of course, we were just a 6-man team. We weren't in any major battles. Although I did get 2 battle stars. They're right over here. One was for the Battle of the Bulge. Of course, we were in that. And I can't remember what the other one was for, but I had 2 of them.
Were you injured?
No, I was not injured. I was fortunate in that respect.
What kind of friendships or camaraderie did you form while serving?
Well, we were great friends, but when the war was over, they went their way, I went my way, and that ended. However, about 5 or 6 years ago, I made contact with another member of the 3186, and he said he has contact with several. So we wound up with 4 of us that were kept in touch with one another. And I have some material here that one of them sent me, which was very interesting, if you feel it should be done.
Can you elaborate?
Huh?
Yeah, tell us about it.
Okay, well, he sent me some information. It was one of the guys. His name was Louis R. DeMarcos. He said when he joined the 3rd Army Signal Corps Battalion, we were amazed to find that only one officer ran the radio link relay system. He deserves a lot of credit for what he accomplished, but fortunately the relay team suffered. That was me, right, the relay. He didn't go out very often with them and only set them up and then leave. In most cases, he simply gave them a location directions and they went out on their own. That was me. When we arrived, things changed. Half the company was sent down to the 8th, 12th, and 20th Corps. Excuse me. I was assigned to the 6th Army, and the remainder stayed at 3rd Army headquarters. You see, here was a battalion that was spread out all over Germany and Europe, all in 6 or 12-man teams. Several other officers and I took turns taking the relay teams to his assigned location. Incidentally, this fellow Lewis was an officer. He was a commissioned officer. Several other officers and I took turns taking the relay teams to their location. It was commanded by a man by the name of Nagel, whom I didn't know, who was hated by most of his officers and men as he ran the battalion like one would run an electric train set. I learned many things from the relay teams, some of whom were operating since D-Day. Many of them were from the 980th Signal Replacement Battalion and assigned wherever needed. They were a great bunch of fellows, but real orphans. We helped them out, records, and many other things. Here's one story of how many they told me. One of the relay teams was in the Battle of the Bulge area. One morning, quite early, it was time to switch to generators. As you remember, they ran only about 4 hours on a tank of gas. When the fellow at that moment of silence, he heard a great roar from down the mountainside. Once he got the generator going again, he went over to the side of the mountain and looked down the valley. He couldn't believe what they saw. There were German tanks as far as the eye could see, and they were starting up their engines. Lucky for the relay team, the Germans hadn't gone up the mountain during the night, and their arrival noise was masked by generator noise. Do you want me to keep reading the rest? Okay. The fellow ran back into the tent and alerted the others on what he saw. They got on the monitor channel and told Rhea what they saw. Rhea had just recently become aware of the widespread attack and had lost contact with the forward base. They told the relay team to get out of there as fast and leave the station running. The boys hopped on their 2, 3, or 4-ton trucks and raced down the mountain road, which was on the opposite side of where the German tanks were massing. Lucky for them, they were just a few miles ahead of the German advance. They didn't stop until they were almost back to base. Everything was confusion, and they were fortunate to get out of attack. I think that's enough. I could keep reading. I can tell you one thing, another story that I myself came in contact, had. We were in, our equipment were in these 2.5 ton trucks and some of the 4 ton trucks. At any rate, there were 5 or 6 trucks, and we were in German territory. And they were the ones that I was in the 3rd or 4th truck. The ones in front were stopped by black service people, and they came up, and the captain gave the right password, and they let them go. We got stopped. We didn't get there that far because there was a barrage. We had to jump out of our trucks and again hide. And after the barrage was over, we got into our trucks, but we were 10 or 15 minutes behind the forward ones. And we get up to this place, and we had to stop. And one of the black fellas, he very serious. He said, you give a password, and then there's a result. What was the password? Oh yeah, he said press, and the response was button. But we didn't know that. The captain knew that. So he said press, and I said no, signal corps. And man, those guns were pointed right at our heads. It took about 15 or 20 minutes before that was straightened out, and we were able to go on.
How was it straightened out?
Say that again?
How was that incident straightened out?
How was it straightened out? Well, we were all sitting down on the ground with our hands crossed, and I guess one of them, there were 3 or 4 or 5 of them, one of them had a phone and was able to contact his contact, and then his contact checked with somebody else, and the next thing, they let us go, let us continue.
Following up with that, did you ever do anything while you were in the service over there that you regretted?
Yeah, well, one thing. We were on this mountaintop, and at that time he was a lieutenant. A lieutenant was in his Jeep, and he and his sergeant, the sergeant was driving, they came up to our site, and we had scrounged from the town. One of us went down to the town, and we were able to scrounge 12 eggs, and in exchange for a package of butter. So they came, and they ate 3 apiece. So we only had a half a dozen, which was not enough. We were so angry, that when they left, we said we would never let them do that again. And the next 3 or 4 days later, they were coming up, and we could see straight down because the Germans had cut down the trees that they could see all the way down the mountain. And we see their Jeep coming up, and I say, this is honest, I took my rifle and I aimed right at him. I wanted to kill him. That's how angry I was. But the other guys too were shooting, and the next thing I know is they stopped, they turned around, and they left.
Did you fire?
Did I fire? Oh yes, I fired dozens of shots. Really at that time I was hoping to hit them. That's how angry we were over a lousy half dozen eggs.
Going back to the friendships and the relationships that you had, what did you do for recreation when you were over there? For fun? Did you guys do anything?
Well, we didn't do very much. And I can't even think of the names of the guys that I was with, except one, a guy by the name of Leonard Melman. He was from Philadelphia, and he was a little bit effeminate, not a lot, but a little bit. As an example, when we were in some German town, we chased the occupants out of the house, and we took over the house. And first thing he did is he came in and said, "Oh, look how beautiful this is. Look at that. Isn't that nice?" He was very sweet. I don't know if he's alive or not. I tried once getting in touch with him, but it was a failure.
When you took over that house, what did you do?
Well, it was our bivouac until we were ready for the next move.
Really quick, before we move on, how did you keep in touch with your family back in the Bronx while you were overseas?
Well, I sent emails to them every day.
Emails?
Maybe it wasn't called an email, but it's something you wrote, you folded it up, and it became an envelope. I don't remember. I thought I used the term email, but maybe it was not. And I do that every day. I wrote to him. And I can tell you...
Who did you write to?
Beg pardon?
Who did you write to?
I wrote to my father mostly. I can remember one incident before we had gotten into France. We were still in England. I received a package. And remember, my father was in the post office. And believe it or not, he had salamis, bolognas, eggs in the package that I received. It was, and they were not cooked eggs. How the heck he sent them without breaking? But that's the post office man for you.
Where were you when the war ended?
When the war ended, I was in Japan.
What were you doing there?
I was waiting for transfer back to the States, but there was a problem there. I had accrued points. They were sending people home on points. Those who had the most points went first. And it so happened we were very high in points because we had been in so many different places. And I can't remember the exact number, but I know it was up near 90 something. And we were waiting to go home. But there wasn't any transportation. So we were stuck there for much longer period than we should have before we shipped out. And we went by boat, but later on I found out that many of them were flown back. But we went by boat, the slow way.
Do you remember how long it took you to get from Japan back to New York?
I don't remember that, but it took 13 days to get from New York to England. That I remember.
How were you received by your family and the community when you returned from the war?
Well, they accepted it. They were very, very happy that I was home, and that was it.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
Well, I joined the 5220 Club. That's a club in which I was unemployed. And they were paying me, I don't remember how much, $20 a month or something, to adjust. And I took the full year to adjust. And then I went back to school.
What did you go back to school for?
Well, I became a physical education teacher. But that was when I graduated, after I graduated. And then, that was about it, yeah.
Are you a member now of any other veteran organizations?
No, I'm not.
Have you been?
Yes, there was a group. I forget what it was. There was a group of us, mostly from the neighborhood, my neighborhood friends. And, but that didn't last more than a year.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Well, I became a teacher. and I taught for 37 years and then retired, and I've been retired since.
Where did you teach?
I taught in Half Hollow Hills, in the Candlewood School. As a matter of fact, I taught 1 year in another school in the district, and then because they were building Candlewood, and then when Candlewood was built, I was transferred to Candlewood, and I took over the science department, and I was the chairman of the science department for many, many, many years.
How did wartime experience affect your life?
It really didn't. See, my attitude was wherever I was going to enjoy it. And I enjoyed the service. And when I went out, when I left the service, I just started something new.
What are some life lessons you learned from being in the military?
I can't recall any specifically that would have an effect on my life.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and military in general?
Well, naturally, I wouldn't like to see my children getting involved in another battle. So I'm pretty much against the war until fairly recently. And now when I see what's happening in Iran and in Syria, I just feel that maybe we gotta do something.
What message or messages would you like to leave for future generations who will hear and watch this video?
Well, I would like to see them know that there isn't any war on, that peace is eventually realized, and that they can all live happily and forever.
Is there anything you feel that we haven't discussed that you want to be added to the interview?
I don't think so. I think I covered much more than I thought I would be able to cover and remember. But things, I guess, do come back. I can remember one incident where, if I can say it, one incident when we were in a German house, the six of us, and there was a group of English soldiers that were there with us, and one of them dropped a grenade, and we all flew as far away as we could, and he stood there and he laughed. He had taken the pin out. Well, we didn't do anything, but his other fellows did. They beat him up. He would never do that again. It was very scary, a grenade in a room. So that was another incident that I witnessed. And I guess that's about it. I appreciate the fact that you people are doing this, and I hope it becomes something meaningful for you people and for anyone who watches it.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure hearing about everything.
I'm happy that I was able to elucidate some things.
Thank you so much, Henry.
Okay, thank you.